People who engage in wrongdoing cannot avoid the consequences of their actions. Write an essay to support this claim, basing your illustrations on John Lara's The Samaritan. This question is general, since it does not tie you to a specific character. Therefore, we are supposed to identify characters from the text, The Samaritan, who engaged in wrongdoing and ultimately suffer the consequences of their actions. In this case, we're going to use an example from Mayor Morsi, and we're going to have a sample paragraph. However, in some other cases, you may be tied to just one specific character. For example, the question may specifically need you to discuss Mayor Morsi. In that instance, you will only focus on illustrations based on Mayor Morsi and not any other character. The first bit of our paragraph is the topic sentence. Mayor Morsi involves himself in dishonest deeds and inevitably faces the ramifications of his actions. The second bit is the background information, a continuation written in continuous prose. Mayor Morsi serves as the leader responsible for directing municipal affairs and shaping public policy. However, the emergence of the Samaritan app threatens to expose deep corruption in the municipality procurement process, bringing all the leaders' illegal activities into the open. The third bit is discussing Mayor Morsi's wrongdoing, his actions. So we continue with the paragraph. I'm going to give many examples to help the student have an easy time identifying them in the text. However, the learner may only pick a few and illustrate them fully. To begin with, he is accused of municipal capture, which is described as the worst form of corruption and abuse of office, where his private interests dictate the direction of public policy. Page 39. When he learns that the Samaritan app could expose the rot in procurement, he refuses to launch it, claiming that municipal leaders need time to reflect on its implications. That's on page 15. In addition, he instructs Nicole to write to officials expressing his reservations. Moreover, he orders Miss Nicole and Miss Narine to immediately halt all activities related to the app in a desperate bid to conceal the leaders' illegalities. That is on page 16. He also convenes secret meetings with other leaders to plot ways of escaping the consequences of their actions on page 20. Additionally, he directs Harvester to use public funds to buy all newspapers from vendors because they contain damaging information about the leaders. That is on page 21. That is on page 21 and page 40. Besides that, he plans to use press conferences to fight allegations leveled against him on page 43. What's more, Mayor Morsi admits engaging in unethical deeds. That's on page 60. Yet he tries to downplay his role in plundering public resources by claiming that unlike other leaders who gobble up the whole loaf meant for the people, he only takes a slice or two or three. That is on page 68 up to page 69. He further pressures Nicole to convince the kids who developed the Samaritan app to remove negative information about him. Shockingly, he brazenly offers Nicole and the children a bribe, declaring that everybody needs money. That is on page 61. On the issue of development, is accused of inflating project costs and overseeing shoddy municipal works. When Nicole refuses to cooperate, he accuses the public of electing evil people into office, then complaining. That is on page 71. In the same vein, he orders Nicole to delete every post on the Samaritan app that portrays him negatively. That is on page 73. And finally, he tries to lure Nicole with a plum job and makes false promises of reform. Public resources will no longer be stolen, justice will be served equally and not reserved for the rich. Police will protect the innocent instead of crooks, and lawmakers will serve public interests rather than feathering their own nests. That's on page 133 to 134. Once we are done with the wrongdoing, we now focus on the consequences. As a result of his actions, Morsi loses consciousness. Upon learning, he might end up in the uninhabitable Baneta Express prison. In addition, he convenes desperate meetings in bid to escape conviction and punishment. That is on page 20 and page 37. He also panics as the Samaritan app sends shockwaves throughout the municipality on page 30 to 55. Furthermore, he is deeply embarrassed when Nicole boldly declines his bribe on page 61. To make matters worse, he suffers further humiliation when he mistakenly shakes Nicole's hand, believing she had accepted the job offer. That is on page 133. He is forced to apologize to Nicole on page 132, and he is compelled to eat humble pie and desperately seek Nicole's help on page 59 to 61. Ultimately, Mayor Morsi pays for his immorality when he is arrested by Tajo, the anti-corruption chief. In panic, he tries to hide behind Nicole as Tajo announces they are being escorted to the anti-corruption headquarters on page 138. We also see that he's uncuffed and bundled out. Humiliation to Morsi or Atunya, the smoke that thunders. And lastly, we end our paragraph with a clincher. Indeed, wrongdoers cannot escape the ramifications of their actions. We have given all the evidence from the text, almost all the evidence from the text on the wrongdoing and the consequences. A student is supposed to pick just a few and use the textual details to develop their paragraph. Since we have so much evidence, the student should not only focus on the arrest on the part of the consequences. They must give all the consequences that the leaders suffer as a result of being exposed for their wrong deeds. Follow me on TikTok at Wafula Wekati, Facebook and X at Wafula Wekati, and my YouTube channel is Wafula Wekati. Please subscribe.